Okay. Anyway, let's start, my friends. Tonight's lesson. It does feel weird to do a Simchas Torah class on the week of Rosh Hashanah, but that was a plan I made in the middle of the summer. So then it made sense. But we're not going to have, after this week, we're not going to have a class for the next 4 weeks, basically, because next Monday is Some Gedalia, but the Monday after Yom Kippur, the Monday after Sukkot, and whatever. So till after Sukkot, there's not going to be a class. So we're already getting ready. Randy, you mind just closing the door behind you? Thank you. Okay, so she's in charge. Tonight's class, as always, hello from all over the world, everyone that's watching. Tonight's class is in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi Ben Yosef, his soul should have an elevation. Shavua Tov from Texas and from London. And of course, hello everybody. Okay, I want to start with a joke that has to do with Pesach. So we're teaching Simchas Torah before Rosh Hashanah. We can say a joke about Pesach too while we're at it, but actually it fits perfectly for what I want to talk about. There's a classic Pesach joke. Stay with me, okay? Punchline is there. There's a classic Pesach joke of this group of beggars that were traveling around. Become beggars, also become friends, a group of homeless people. And there were some Jews in the group, and they told the non-Jew in the group, Passover night is the best night to hang out in the Jewish community because it's a mitzvah to invite poor people to your home for the Pesach Seder, for the Passover meal. So come with us. We'll give you a kippah. Let's put a kippah on your head so you look a little Jewish. And we're going to go to the synagogue. We'll stand there after the services, and someone will invite us over, and we'll have you'll have a meal, wine, fish, meat, you name it, you're going to have it. Wine and fish and meat, and sounds gewaldic, sounds great. He goes, stands outside the synagogue. His mazel, he gets separated from his friends, and they go to one house, and he ends up by himself being invited to a different house. He goes, table is set, magnificent. It looks like a feast for a king. It looks like it's going to be good. Looks can tell it's worth it already. He says, down the first thing they do is they pour him a glass of wine. That's a great way to start. A glass of wine. He has some wine. It's off to a great start. They go to wash their hands. Okay, we gotta wash our hands. And then a piece of parsley and some salt water. Okay, he's never done that before. That's not a great appetizer, salt water. But listen, you're not gonna complain. Then they start pouring more. They're breaking some crackers, whatever. Not sure about that either. But then they pour more wine. Okay, they're pouring some more wine. He's happy. The non-Jews never been to Seder before. They didn't know what happens at a Seder. And then they start reading. And they're reading. And then they're talking. At first the kids are reading, and the adults are reading, then they're talking, then they're pointing, then they're this, and they're that, and the discussion, and the arguments, and back. The meeting was getting later and later. You remember that experience, right? And it's going and going and going and going and going. Like, well, where's the food? They're just sitting and talking over an empty table. How long can they talk and read for? How long can the prayers be? An hour goes by, 2 hours go by. He's starving. He's starving. They don't make good food. And the wine just got to him. A little bit of wine, no food. He started to feel like delirious. Finally, after like 2.5 hours, they get up to go wash their hands again. Okay, maybe there's a hope. Then it'll be salt water again. They wash their hands. And they start serving crackers, stale matzah. That's it. Stale, not even the bread, not even a salad, not even some potatoes and salt water, nothing. He can barely chew. He's breaking his teeth. Never ate something so hard in his entire life. Beggars don't eat something this bad. Even they don't have such stale food. He's chewing. He can barely chew. He can barely swallow. There's no other food that they eat it with. Nothing. And then they found some vegetables, some white vegetable. Mar, doesn't know what it is. He takes a bite and he starts choking and he's crying and he runs out of the house. He was tricked. He was duped. He runs out of the house crying with tears from the mar that he ate. And then he goes back to the hangout where they hung. And the next day, his friends see, how was your first Seder? You got a good meal? Good chicken soup? Good matzo balls? Good filter fish? You pranked me. I said, pranked you? What are you talking about? So I went there. They just read, and then they gave me some old crackers that were barely chewable. And then I ate something that was so bitter. I was crying. There was no food. You tricked me. They said, oh, you idiot. You foolish person. If you would have stayed 2 more minutes after the mar, you would have had a full meal with the fish and the soup and the brisket and the timis and all that. He ate the mar and he ran out. It's a joke, but it's actually a very true story. I see it happen every single year. Every single year, you have Jews that get inspired and they come to Shul, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, and the rabbi is reading, and he's reading, and he's reading, and the chazan is going and going, and then Here, at least I crack jokes during the sermon. Some rabbis pontificate a lot during sermons, and they go on in a big, their deep baritone voice, and they're, they're going. And this poor Jew, who barely knows what Judaism is all about, who's barely experienced the joy and the energy and the depth of Yiddishkeit, thinks that it's some boring service. And so he eats the maror, he fasts on Yom Kippur, he comes to a shul, no food, no kiddush, no cholent, nothing. And to him, what is shul? A boring sermon with no cholent. And after he finally, the Yom Kippur service is over, he's like, I'm out of here. Don't bother me again till next year. And as a rabbi, I say, if you not idiot, God forbid, you don't know. If you would stay one more week in shul, Simchas Torah is coming. You know how much fun we have in synagogue Simchas Torah? We have a party. Some of you have never been there for Simchas Torah, right? You guys have never been to Simchas Torah. When you were little, you used to go to Simchas Torah. Okay. So, I don't know if Steve, you ever been to Simchas Torah? Yeah, Simchas Torah. David, been to Simchas Torah? Simchas Torah is, it's a special time. Let's just say that. I don't want to say on Facebook, on being recorded, saying, having Simchas Torah is not on camera, so it's safe. But it's an amazing time. The joy, the happiness. First of all, there's tons of food. Chana goes overboard. There's tons of food, tons of l'chaim. We're dancing. We're celebrating. It's a great night. It's a great night. We don't drink l'chaim. We don't drink. Jews don't drink. Jews say l'chaim. We say l'chaim. If you remind me, I can explain to you the difference. It's not for tonight's class, but there is a difference, and in the right time, I could explain it. But here's the point: these Jews come. And they're good people. Listen, they sat through the whole Yom Kippur service. You got to be a good Jew to sit through a Yom Kippur sermon, right? They sit through the whole thing. They swallow that maror. It's pretty bitter. They swallow it, and then they go running for the trees. Running for the hills, whatever the expression is. They go running. And they don't know what they're missing. So tonight I want to talk about Simchas Torah. And the way it's good to talk about it now before Rosh Hashanah, you should know that we're going to talk about God, and we'll pray to God. Atonement and repentance and find the essence of our souls and the oneness of Yom Kippur we talked about. But in Judaism, everything is structured. Although sometimes to a outsider or someone less educated, it seems like a lot of Judaism is haphazard, like random stuff. Like why do they put sukkahs like 4 days after Yom Kippur? They would have been planned the calendar a little smarter. I'm saying there'd be more time for sukkahs. It'd be a little easier on some of us if there was more time between the holidays. It seems a little. But everything is exact with a precision, with a spiritual structure and the spiritual ladder and a crescendo that goes higher and higher and higher. So we go from Rosh Hashanah to the 10 days of repentance, to the climax of Yom Kippur, to the climax of Ne'ilah. But that's not the climax. After that climax of Ne'ilah is a whole new, higher, deeper dimension of closeness with God expressed in the joy of the holiday of. And if you think Sukkot is even more special than Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah is even more powerful, more holy, and more special than Sukkot, which is even more than Yom Kippur. So many Jews make it to Yom Kippur, and they don't know that that's not the end of the story. That's not the high. Actually, the journey of the month of Tishrei, the journey of the Jewish soul connecting to God does not stop at Yom Kippur. It continues on a deeper way, on the more personal way, deeper and more personal than that on Simchas Torah. Okay. So now that we've set the stage for what we understand, which is what is the ultimate level of the journey, the ultimate crescendo, the ultimate step on the ladder that has the greatest joy of Simchas Torah, so let's understand what is the holiday of Simchas Torah. So normally, when I normally would do such a class, what will we do next? We look at our sheets and look at what does the Torah say about Simchas Torah, right? That's what we normally do. We look at the verse, say, what does God say about the holiday of Simchas Torah? What's the reason why we celebrate? However, there's one very technical difficulty with doing that. You know what the technical difficulty is? Simchas Torah is not in the Torah. The holiday of Simchas Torah does not exist in the Bible. I'm seeing your faces. It doesn't exist. I'll give you the entire 5 books of Moses. There's a Chumash right behind you on the bookcase. You can go from cover to cover. You will not find not the word Simchas Torah mentioned, not the holiday, not the theme, not the celebration, not the dancing, not the finishing the Torah. None of it. It doesn't exist. The reason why there's no source sheet for tonight is because there's no source. Literally, I didn't make it up, but it is made up. It is made up. In fact, it's not even 100% exactly clear what is the original source for the celebration of Simchas Torah. The reason why we do it is because in Shulchan Aruch, in the Code of Jewish Law, when it describes the holiday of Shmini Atzar, which is the last day of Sukkot, which has nothing to do with completing the Torah, actually. Shmini Atzar was the day when they would gather the end of the summer produce. The whole Sukkot was the end of the season of all the stuff out in the fields. Torah says 7 days you sit in the Sukkah. We talked about it last week. If you look at last week's Torah, what we discussed last week about Sukkot, doesn't even mention Shmini Atzar right there. Just the 7 days you dwell on the Sukkah. Elsewhere, the Torah says, Vayem Hashmini, one time the Torah says, on the 8th day will be a day of gathering for you. It'll be a day when you're gathering all the produce. Rashi tells us the famous Medrash, it's a day when God, so to say, gathers the Jewish people to himself, because the 7 days of Sukkot is a massive party, a massive holiday, when all the nations are celebrating with God, which is why over the course of the 7 days of Sukkot, the Jews in the temple would offer 70 bulls as offerings each day. 14 bulls, 13 bulls, 12 bulls, 11 bulls, 10 bulls, which equals a total of 70. And then God says, after all the celebration of the nations, I want one more day, just me and you alone, us two together, which we've talked about in previous classes, which is similar to what I'm going to talk about tonight, but a little bit of a different, but it's the same idea. You know, the oneness, the God says, I want to be one with you. We could have done that source. I want to be one with you, etc. But that's it. In the Torah, doesn't say anything about finishing the Torah on Simchas Torah. Doesn't say the word Simchas Torah. Doesn't say anything about dancing. Doesn't exist. So the Shulchan Aruch in the Code of Jewish Law, it brings about celebrating, about finishing the Torah. Moshe at Mount Sinai, he's the one that decided how the Torah should be split up into the 53 parshas of the week. Moses is the one that made the separations. And he said that once a week we should read one section of the Torah to finish it once a year, even though some communities would do it once every 3 years. It wasn't like a hard halacha or a hard rule. In fact, some communities didn't even finish it every year. They finished it once every 3 years. And it was decided, the Code of Jewish Law says that you should start after the holidays. So therefore, the beginning, the ending will be on Torah. And then Reb Moshe Isserles, the Ramah, he writes, like as a footnote, he adds to this statement, and he says that some custom have the community that on the night before they finish the reading of the Torah, they dance in circles around the bima, called hakafot. Hakafot means to circle. That's what the word means. They make hakafot, they make circles of dancing around the bima, celebrate the joy of finishing the Torah. That's the source for the dancing and the circles of dancing and the celebration of Simchas Torah. In Shulchan Aruch is brought not as a commandment, not even as a rabbinic requirement, but as a custom of Jewish people. That's the source. So I can't show you a verse that talks about it because there is no verse. And yet, as I will soon share with you, the dancing with the Torah that's not written in the Torah, that's not required by the Torah, is actually one of the deepest of deep secrets of the relationship with God and the Jewish people. And that is why the joy of Simchas Torah is a joy that is unparalleled any other day of the entire year. There's no mitzvah that we have, there's no moment that Jews have that creates the kind of joy that our souls feel on the celebration of dancing with the closed Torah on the night of Simchas Torah. Here in Shul, the dancing, what you may think the wildness, that it looks like craziness to someone that doesn't understand what's going on, is the pure joy of our souls that has no parallel at any other day of the entire year. So why? What's so unbelievably special, this climax, this crescendo, that we're dancing with complete abandon, complete lack of self-awareness, in a state of a high, on a day that doesn't even exist in the Bible. Okay. I will tell you, by the way, that if you were ever I was never 70 at Simchas Torah, but it's known by Hasidim, and you hear the stories that by the Rebbe, the greatest joy at any time was the joy of Simchas Torah. Hasidim would always say, if you didn't see the joy of the Rebbe at Simchas Torah, where the entire 770 would dance for hours. Literally, there was no room to move. the most crowded day all year in 770 was a Simchas Torah. Tens of thousands crammed into the room. It's not that big. There was nowhere to move. You literally, the entire 770 jumped up and down like one, just like that, literally. Everyone jumped together and landed, and everyone turned around the room with his arms. Yeah, there were definitely some safety violations in that room. What? The streets, everything. Okay. So, before I explain to you, by way of introduction, to explain to you the tremendous power and the tremendous holiness of the dancing that we do on the night of Simchas Torah and the joy that our soul feels, I want to ask you another question. Okay? I promise you'll answer the first one, but let's ask another question. Let's connect it. You all know the beginning of the Torah, right? The very first verse, the first word of the Torah. What's the first word? Correct. Bereshis bara Elokim. That's the big joy. Simchas Torah, we start to read the Torah from the beginning, and we read Bereshis, in the beginning, bara Elokim, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, there's a very famous question on this verse. Why does the Torah begin with the letter Bet and not with the letter Aleph? So if you know even the first two letters of the alphabet, just know Aleph Bet. You know Aleph comes before Bet. You don't need to come after that. It's okay. So normally we try and start in the beginning. So the Torah should have started with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is the Aleph. Instead, it starts with the letter Bet. And by the way, this is not only in the Torah, this is true also in the Talmud. If you open up the Talmud, any volume, the first page is page 2. There is no page 1 in any volume of the entire Talmud. Pick a Talmud, pick any volume, and open it up. It's not page 1. The first page, the opening line, you start reading, you start learning on page 2. Now, technically, you can answer that the page 1 was the cover page, and page 2, but that's the way it is. It's page 2, and there's a lesson for us here. Now, by the way, when I ask, isn't it like, should it start with an Aleph instead of a Bet? It's not just a semantic question. In Torah, as I said, everything is precise, right? Everything is structured with a reason. And the Aleph is actually a very holy letter. It's a holy letter. It's the beginning of the letter of R, which is God's light. Emunah is faith. Emet is truth. And so the beginning of Emes, truth, is Aleph. And the beginning of R, of light, of God, is. And therefore, the revelation of God into the world should have begun with the letter Aleph. And if you think I'm making it up, guess what? The Medrash tells us that the letter Aleph had the same argument. And the letter Aleph, says the Medrash, came to God and complained to God. And the letter Aleph said to God, why are you depriving me of my role of being the opening of the Torah, being the beginning of God's relation to mankind by making the Torah begin not with me, but with the letter Bet. And in fact, it says that for 26 generations, the letter Aleph was challenging God on this. Until when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments, 26 generations after the creation of the world, then when God gave the Torah, what's the opening word or opening letter of the 10 Commandments? What's the opening word of the 10 Commandments? Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am the Lord your God. The word Anochi begins with the letter Aleph. And then God, so to say, fixed his mistake, so to say. He did teshuvah, and he told the letter Aleph, you are indeed number one. You are the first letter of the 10 Commandments. Which means that this question or complaint or critique is quite valid. The letter Aleph is complaining to God and saying, oh God, why are you messing up the structure of divine revelation by putting the letter Bet before the letter Aleph? And God agrees to the letter Aleph. He accepts the claim of the letter Aleph to the extent that God has to make sure to appease the letter Aleph by making the letter Aleph the first letter of the 10 Commandments. If so, he should have just started the Torah with the letter Aleph. Now, you might tell me he couldn't. That's the way the Torah starts. It starts with the word Bereshis. It's not. I hope I don't confuse you what I'm about to say next. To start the Torah with the letter Bet require God to write the Torah a little bit, I don't even convoluted, but a little bit strange. You know what would have been what does the first words of the Torah mean? In the beginning, God created. What would have been an easier way of saying that? God created in the beginning. Yeah. We're used to saying in the beginning, comma, God created the heavens and the earth. But it's only because we have that comma there we know how to read it. If you wouldn't have the comma, you know what it would sound like? There was a creature called, and let's do the Hebrew. Let's do each word in Hebrew. Bereshis, bara Elokim, 3 words. The word Bereshis means in the beginning. The word bara means created. Elokim means God. So let's read each word in order. Bereshis, this entity called Bereshis in the beginning. Bara created, a second entity called Elokim, who then made heavens and earth. If you were to read the Torah literally, without the comma, without the rabbinic, interpretation, the vowels or punctuation, on a literal sense would actually mean there was an entity called Bereshis that created something else called Elokim. The right way to start the story is to say there was Elokim, there was God who created in the beginning heavens and earth. And if the would have been written that way, if it would have been written Elokim, bara bereshis, es hashamayim v'es aretz, that God created the beginning, the heavens and the earth, guess what letter the Torah would have started with? Aleph. Which means that the natural way of writing the Torah would have been to begin the Torah with the name of God as the creator of heavens and earth. And if God would have started the Torah with his name as the, then guess what would have been the first letter of the Torah? Instead, God stretches it a little. In the beginning, God created heavens and earth. We're going back from the beginning, heavens and earth, with sticking God in the middle, just in order that the Torah could start with the letter Bet and not with the letter Aleph. Interesting, huh? I'm going to make it even stronger. There's a story. Let's drink some tea. There's a story in the Gemara in Tainus of the Greek emperor whose name was Ptolemy. And this Greek emperor Ptolemy decided he wanted an authentic translation of the Torah into Greek, called the Septuagint, or however you pronounce it. And now the Jews had never translated the Torah into another language because that's the beginning of the corruption of Torah. Torah had to be studied in the original from a teacher that would teach you from the original text. And now he ordered 70 sages to come and translate the Torah for him, but he was worried that they wouldn't do an authentic job. He was worried that they would change things in order that he should, he didn't trust that the Jews would give him an authentic translation of the Torah. So you know what he did? He took 70 different rabbis and locked them in 70 different rooms without cell phones. Can you imagine when you locked them without a cell phone? Okay, it's a problem. No cell phone. If communicated one rabbi to the other rabbi, he provided them with kosher food. He got a good kosher caterer to cater to 70 rabbis. He gave them pen and paper, or quill and ink, probably rather, and parchment. Give them a laptop. And said, "Go to work. You can't leave this room until you translate the entire Torah for me into Greek." And now all the 70 rabbis have a dilemma. Each one of them has the same dilemma, but they're in a way where they can't communicate and plan together. There's a number of words in the Torah or statements in the Torah which, if translated literally, could create wrong ideas about Judaism. Anyone that ever translates knows it's very hard to translate literally. When you translate, things get misconstrued. Even if it's a literal, even if it's an accurate translation, it's not a good translation because things get lost in translation. Things that work in one language or in one code don't work in another language. And there were a number of things rabbis about. And the Talmud says that God did a miracle and gave the rabbis, each one of them, Ruach, spirit of divine prophecy. And with this divine spirit, each one of the 70 made the same directions, shall we say. I'll give you a few examples. For example, there is a non-kosher animal. One of the non-kosher animals in the Torah is called arnavas. That's the Hebrew name for it. You know what the problem with that word is? Ptolemy's wife was called Arnavas. That was her name. So the rabbis were not going to translate Arnavas when that's her name. And so they all agreed to skip that word in the translation. 70 rabbis all made the same decision to skip the name of Ptolemy's wife, Arnavas. And for example, Hashem worked. Hashem finished working on the seventh day and he rested. We understand how Hashem worked and rested, how rest is a creation of God. But they changed it. God finished working on the sixth day and rested on the seventh day. They changed the translation to not be as literal, but to make sense to the flow and to the message. So guess what was a very first change every one of the 70 rabbis made? They changed the translation from Bereshis bara Elokim, that in the beginning, comma, God created, comma, heavens and earth. They changed it to say, God created in the beginning heavens and earth. Which means that they themselves, when they wanted to translate the content of the Torah, had to change the order that the Torah should not begin with the letter base, but should begin with the letter Aleph, Elokim bara Bereshis. And if so, we have this very serious question, which is why indeed does the Torah and the Talmud not begin with the first letter of the alphabet, the letter of Emet, the letter of truth, the letter of Or, the letter of light, the letter of God's divine revelation, instead start with the letter Bet? Good question? Yes.
It doesn't even have to start with the bet. It's unnecessary with bet. The bet makes it in the beginning as opposed to
the beginning.
God created.
Correct.
The sheet God created.
Correct. Because every shit.
The bet is added in there. It's not even necessary.
Yeah. Okay. So, why does the Torah begin with the bet? And as I said, the Talmud too. Every volume of Talmud also begins on page bet, page 2. There's no page 1 of any volume of Talmud. Reminds me of the joke of this rabbi wants to give a speech to the people in the synagogue. So he says next week's homework is to read the book of Leviticus, chapter 15. Homework, and next week we're going to test you. We're going to talk about the chapter. So next week the rabbi gets up and he says, by raise your hands, who read Leviticus chapter 53? A bunch of people raise their hands. Says, okay, perfect. There is no Leviticus chapter 53. Now let's begin today's sermon about saying the truth and not lying, right? So there is no letter bet. There is no, someone said, I studied page 1 of the Talmud. You know they're lying to you. So the Rebbe gives a beautiful answer. Beautiful answer as follows. The Torah begins with the letter bet to tell us that when you start learning, you're only at the second stage. Bet is 2. When you start to study the text of the Torah, and you start to read the text of the Chumash, or you start to study the text of the Talmud, that's not the beginning. That's the second step. Do you know what's the first step? Before and above and beyond the actual studying of the actual text that we're learning is first the desire of the soul to touch God himself. Before you can study the Torah, you need to know that there is a giver of the Torah. There's the wisdom of the Torah, and then there's the actual God himself, the source, the one of wisdom, the original author, the Nosen HaTorah, the giver of the Torah. So when you start to study, the first thing is the Aleph. The Aleph is God. As we already mentioned, the Aleph is Anochi. The Aleph is God himself, Elokim. The Aleph is the beginning of our relationship with God. It's the beginning of our study. In fact, that's why before we learn Torah, we need to make a blessing on the Torah before the learning of Torah. Because if you learn Torah without first making a blessing and acknowledging that the Torah is the wisdom of God and God is the giver of the Torah, you're missing the foundation upon which all of Torah is built upon. Torah is not just an intellectual field of study. You know, there's a philosophy, there's psychology, there's medicine, there's mathematics, and there's Judaism, there's divine wisdom, there's the Torah. No. Torah is the very essence, the very deepest thoughts and desires of God Almighty himself. And that's why first you need to have an Aleph. First you need to have a connection with the one, the only one. The Aleph is a reference to Alufo Shel Olam. Aluf in Hebrew is chief, a guy in charge. With the Aluf of the universe, with the master of the universe. After you have the connection with the Aleph, with the oneness of God, with the Aluf Shel Olam, with the chief of the world, now you can start to study the actual text. That's letter Bet, that's letter number 2. Make sense? It's a very important idea. And now let's go to the celebration of Simchas Torah. All year long, we study Torah. All year long, we learn the wisdom of Torah. We think, and we learn, and we learn more, and we learn more. All of that is a closest to God that comes with the wisdom that God gives us. And that's the way we connect to God. We can't connect to God without using the tools and the Torah that God gave us to connect Him. However, the ultimate love that a Jew has for God cannot be embraced through an in-depth Talmud class or a deep all-night study session. The mind is not the soul, and in order for the soul to really feel one with God, it's not going to come through learning. It's going to the feet lift our head higher than our head can go by itself. In fact, the feet can go higher than the head. Higher than the head. Because the feet, with their simplicity, with their purity, are able to lift up, to go straight higher than when the brain can go. And I'm going to explain it like this. It's all from what I'm saying now. The next thing is also from the Rebbe. There's 3 kinds of relationships. It's not the example I'm going to give, but there's 3 kinds of relationships. Let's give an example in a marriage, okay? What's the first kind of a marriage? Not the one where everyone screws out. I said the joke last week where this guy said the first few years we were married, I did all the talking and my wife was doing all the listening. Then the next few years, my wife did all the talking and I did all the listening. Now we both do all the talking and the neighbors do the listening. So not that kind of marriage. That's in a happy, healthy, loving marriage. So the first level of a loving marriage is when the wife gives a command and the husband obeys. I'll say the other way, I'd be chauvinistic and whatever. With man gives a command, the wife obeys, that'd be terrible. And but if the wife gives a command, the husband obeys, it makes perfect sense. Okay. So one spouse asks for something and the other one does it. And does it actually within the same reasonable period of time. Like I saw a cute comic. It's actually about Sukkot. Sukkot is coming. So in the image, the guy tells his wife, if I told you I'm going to take down the sukkah, I promise you I'll take it down. You don't need to keep on asking me every 3 months. Right? So the spouse asks, your wife asks for something, right away, the garbage, you don't say tomorrow, you don't say after I finish watching the show, after I finish playing whatever I'm doing on my phone, you get up and you do what your wife asked. It's beautiful. Would you call that a happy marriage? Peace. It's a happy marriage. We're getting along. There's respect. We're listening to each other. We're following what each other wants, etc. But then there's even better level of marriage. You know what the better kind of marriage is? What? A better marriage is when you can already read between the lines and get the hints. It's a little harder, I know. Requires a lot of skill and brilliance where you can understand what your wife was hinting to you or what she didn't say between what she did say. This guy says, when I was first married, I used to make the mistake of believing my wife. So when she would tell me, we got to speak, I made the mistake of thinking that I should speak. But now I'm much smarter. When she says, we got to speak, I behave like I just got pulled over by an officer. I say, yes, sir, no, sir, until I find out what crime I'm being accused of. So he's able to figure out in between the lines when she said, I don't mind eating later. She really meant, I want you to come right now. And he got the hint and he came right away. It's a much stronger relationship here, right? Yes, you with me? Much better. But is that the ultimate proof of a real, deep, enduring love and an enduring relationship? What's the ultimate sign of a real relationship? Help me out. What? Here, you're a couple. Let's go. Steve, let's put you on the spot. God forbid. I won't ask the men this question. We have a few married men sitting with their wives here. Oh, Sadal, very good, Sadal. Yeah, the men were going to say they're afraid of saying the wrong answer. All the married men here are off the hook. The ultimate love is, as Sadal correctly said, when on your own, without even a hint, you think, what could I do that would really make my wife happy today? And you know your wife so well, or you know your husband so well, you know your child so well, you know your mother so well, that without being asked, without being hinted, without waiting for them to be in a bad mood where you're trying to, do damage control, just on your own, you surprise them and do something you know that they would want. That's a real sign of love, right? The ultimate love is not that I listen to you when you tell me something. It's not even that I listen to you when you hint me something and, it's like, okay, fine. I know what you want. Or I see you're upset. So because I see you upset, let me try and be nice to you today. And let me go shopping for you or offer to do something for you because I see you're upset. The ultimate love is when I, on my own initiative, without you doing anything, without you even hinting anything, without you even being in a bad mood, I have to try and fix it. On my own initiative, on my own brain power, I know you so well. I know what you would want, what would make you happy, and I do it for you for no reason. That's the ultimate love. Right? So, there's three kinds of actions that Jews do. There's three kinds of ways that Jews express our love to Hashem. Three ways we express our love to God. The first way is a mitzvah. A mitzvah. God says to do something, and I'm a good boy, and I obey. I'm a good spouse, right? God says, for example, sit in the sukkah. For 7 days to dwell in the sukkah. So I'm a very well-behaved Jew. I'm a good spouse. I'm faithful to the covenant we made with God. And I go and I sit in the sukkah, do exactly what God told me to do. God says, the lulav and the esrog on the holiday. I take the lulav, I take it outside, I make a blessing, I shake it in all directions. I'm a good Jew. I'm doing exactly what I was told to do, no complaints. What's an even higher, deeper level? When the Jews on our own tried to figure out what was God hinting to us. If you've ever studied Talmud, you know that the whole Talmud is about us trying to extrapolate every single letter of what God said. We're so in love with God, we spend our whole day analyzing and thinking deeper and deeper into understanding what exactly was God saying. What exactly is the deeper message here? And so we do the mitzvah action, not because God explicitly commanded us to do it, but because we on our own figured out that this was what God was hinting to us. So, for example, on Sukkot, besides for the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah or dwelling in the sukkah, besides for the explicit command of God to shake the lulav and the esrog during the 7 days of Sukkot, there's another mitzvah called Nisuch Hamayim. Nisuch Hamayim is the pouring, literally the water libation. It's the pouring of water on the altar every morning. Let me briefly explain this very interesting phenomenon. In the temple, every day they would pour wine on the altar together with the daily offerings. In the morning and afternoon, together with the animal, was a pouring of wine. During the 7 days of Sukkot, besides for the regular, typical wine libation, there was an additional pouring of water. They would go the night before to the well, and there would be a tremendous celebration and dancing. They would draw water from the well, and then they would dance through the streets to the temple, and all night long, they would dance in the courtyard of the temple, waiting till the morning would come, and as soon as morning came, they would bring the daily offering, the morning offering, and then with tremendous joy, they would pour the water on the altar. The celebration of all-night dancing is called Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which means the Simcha, the rejoicing celebration of the poor. After Mayim B'Sason, the Mayim was a verse in Tanakh describing the joy of the pouring of the Mayim B'Sason, of the pouring of the water. Mayim B'Sason, Mayim, right? That's the pouring of the water. But guess what? This mitzvah of the pouring of the water on the altar is not written anywhere in the Torah. It's not written anywhere that for the 7 days of Sukkot, The Torah gives all the sacrifices for Sukkot, all the Musaf offerings, all the additional animals that were offered. The Jews did that. In the list of additional offerings, I can't do it right now without getting too technical and confusing you, but there's one word that's written, instead of mishpatah, mishpatam, kimishpatam, with the letter mem at the end. There's a word known as a v'niskehem, one of unsacheha, it's extra yud. And then again, at the very end, the last one, this is also kimishpatam, there's an extra mem, or another word with extra mem. So the rabbis extrapolated the extra mem. So over the course of like 20, 30 verses, the extra mem, the yud, and the mem spells the word mayim. You'll trust me. It's like over 30 verses. And I wasn't going to show it now, but if you look in the Chumash, you'll see it. The same thing is 7 days. One time it switches for a mem, for a yud, for a mem. So from here we learn out, hidden in the text. There's no word mayim in the Torah. But in one verse, the word's written with an extra mem in the plural format. The kimishpatam. So the mem at the end is extra. And instead of in this kehem, they're pouring. It says unsacheha, it's pouring, singular with a yud. From here we learn out mayim. So it's a hint. The rabbis who wrote the Talmud, they had a tradition, but they worked on it and they found a source that God wants us to have mayim, to have water on Sukkot. And so we celebrate with the pouring of water on the altar. Okay, that's what's called a takana, a rule, a decree of the rabbis. It's also a Moshe Sinai, a tradition all the way back from Moses on Sinai. The Jews took upon themselves, for example, reading the Torah every single Saturday. The Torah, there's no mitzvah to do the Torah reading on Shabbat. In the Bible, there's no mitzvah to read the Torah every Shabbat. Moshe at Mount Sinai gave us from already then a rule. This is how you should divide it to finish every year. But then there's a third kind of action the Jews do. It's not a commandment that's explicitly commanded to us by God. It's not even a takana, which is a rabbinic enactment or rabbinic decree that's based on a source hinted to in the Torah, finding a way how to see its message in the Torah. Rather, it's a minhag. Minhag means it's a custom. A custom. A custom. A minhag Yisrael, a custom of the Jewish people. What's the source of a custom? What's the source of a custom? Us. Us. We start customs. The custom is us. We don't have a custom because God said to. Not even because we figured out when the Torah said the word the esrog is a beautiful fruit of a beautiful tree. We had the class. So the fruit of a beautiful tree, the way the rabbis figured out the esrog. No. We on our own said, what could we do to express our love for God? So when the Jew does a mitzvah, are we doing what God wants? Absolutely. Are we good Jews? Absolutely. When we do something that on our own we figured out was God hinting to us, are we even more connected to God? Like in the marriage, right? When you're able to get the hints and when you're able to see that your wife's getting upset, so you're able to start, proactively trying to do damage control before the full explosion. That's great. But the ultimate level of love is when we on our own initiative, not because we're told to, not because we have to. We choose, what could I do to show my love for God? Because I want to show it, not because God's asking for it. Now think about this. Let's think about the consequences and the joy. What's the greatest consequence? If you don't, let's say you were thinking that your wife would really like you to stop by her favorite restaurant, pick up sushi for dinner. You thought about it, but you didn't do it. It was a nice idea when you're driving home, but you're too lazy to go out of your way, and you just went home and had her make dinner instead. Did you do anything wrong? No. Are you in trouble? Are you sleeping on the couch? No. You're not in trouble, right? The consequence is not so great. If you didn't get the hint, is it bad? It's getting there. It's still not like she didn't tell you something, you ignored her. Then if you don't do what you told her, then it's really bad. So the consequences get worse as it goes on. But on the other hand, on the flip side, think about the joy. Is your wife full of love and happiness and full of love for you because you do what she told you to do? No. When on your own, you can see that she wants something, that she's hinting something, that she needs something, even though she didn't explicitly ask you for it. And you figure out on your own what she wants and you give it to her, much greater, right? But then when you do something completely unexpected, unasked for, the love, the joy of that moment, 5 stars. Amazing, right? Amazing. Let's think of the joy of the holiday of Sukkot. When we sit in the sukkah, are we happy? Are we full of joy? Yeah, we're happy. We're singing. We shake the lulav and esrog. It's a mitzvah. We're happy. But the joy is not tremendous joy. It's just not. I'm saying the fact is, look outside. When people shake the lulav and the esrog, are they dancing with joy because they're shaking the lulav and the esrog? No. You're doing what God told you to do. You're a good Jew. You're doing what you're told to do. The joy of the dancing of Simchat Beis HaShoeva, the joy of the dancing all night, the way they would celebrate to bring the water, a lot more happy. Been to Grand Heights and Sukkot, they dance. It's a lot more joyful. The joy of Sukkot, not the actual mitzvah of the sukkah, but the joy of Sukkot is much more. That's like the joy when you see that your wife is having a rough day, and so you on your telling you to do something to try and help her out. But the ultimate joy, the greatest joy, the happiest joy of the entire year is the moment when we invented a holiday. Is the night when we decided God is hinting we should do the Torah every year. Tomorrow we'll finish the way that God wants us to finish. But tonight I'm going to celebrate not because God asked me to, not because He's expecting me to, not because He's hinting that I should, but because I love God so much and I feel so close to Him and I feel such a strong yearning to give something of my own to God that tonight I want to dance just because I want to give to God. There's no parallel to that anywhere else in Judaism. There's no to that. It's an invented holiday. It's invented from our desire to express our joy to God that comes not because God told it, but because we want to. I'll tell you a story and I'll finish off. I remember as a yeshiva student, hearing the following story. I remember hearing the following story about someone, and I didn't understand it. Now I'm married, I'm a smarter person. My wife taught me a lot of wisdom. And now I understand. But so there's a story that someone came to the Baal Shem Tov. And he asked the Baal Shem Tov, teach me, how do you love God? What does it mean to truly have Avas Hashem, to have true love of God? How can I have true love of Hashem? So the Baal Shem Tov told this chassid, go to this and this place, to this and this bar, it's a tavern, sit there in the tavern, and there you're going to learn what does it mean to truly love God. Okay, so he goes, whatever the Baal Shem Tov says, he travels to whatever town it was, he comes to the local bar, he gets himself a seat in the front where he can see everything going on. He's not drinking, he's not going to drink in a bar by himself full of Jews don't drink. Remember I told you Jews don't drink. Say l'chaim. But you can't say l'chaim by yourself. The reason, if you drink by yourself, that's already alcohol. If you're with someone else, the word l'chaim, I'm getting off subject, the word l'chaim is 2 yuds. Yud man. Because l'chaim is only when 2 yids are together. Anyway. Yeah. Yids is a l'chaim. One person by himself is just drinking alcohol, and that's already the beginning of alcoholism, and that's already a dangerous place to go, and you shouldn't be doing that. 2 Jews together say l'chaim. So anyway, there was no say l'chaim. So he's sitting there not drinking, he's sitting there watching and observing. And he sees 2 drunks, and they're sitting there, and one's like slobbering all over the other guy. I love you, I love you, I love you. And the other guy who's not as drunk says, yeah, you love me? Tell me, what's bothering me right now? So what's bothering me? I don't know. Well, you told me what's bothering you. He says, if you don't know what's bothering me, then you don't really love me. So you didn't tell me. And the drunk says to the other guy, the other drunk, if you would really love me, you know what was bothering me. And this chassid understood the lesson of Hashem to want him to see that if you really love someone, you don't just do what they told you, but you understand what's bothering them. I can appreciate this story more, but that's exactly this message. Real love of God is not that God told me to celebrate and not something what God said. Of course, that's beautiful. God said, shake the lulav in the esrog, we do what God said. The ultimate love, the truest love, the most powerful expression of love that a Jew could ever possibly express is the love of a holiday we invented. Doesn't exist, we invented it. in order for us to share our love and to express our love to God. And that's why, going back to what we started with, the dancing on the night of Simchas Torah is not by studying with a book. It's not with a class. The studying cannot encapsulate or express that love. The studying of Torah, that's base. That's Bereshis. That's page number 2. That's already where I'm listening and trying to internalize and trying to figure out the hints that God is giving to me in His wisdom. So all year we're on letter Bet. All year we're studying the wisdom of God, because if you don't study the wisdom of God, you can't love God, you can't know God. But the way to ultimately and most truly express that love for God, the Aleph, if you will, the real Aleph of the Torah, the real one of Torah that's not in the text, that's the dancing in the circle with the Torah closed with our feet all night. Understand? That, my friend, is the deep secret of Simchas Torah and why the joy and the celebration is so great. We need to study Torah to get us there, but the ultimate love, the ultimate joy, that's that moment of oneness with God. And that's why it's the climax of the whole high holidays. We're going closer, we're atoning, we're purifying, coming to one with the essence of God. And after God became one with us, and God forgave us, and God loves us, and God brought us into His inner chamber, which is Yom Kippur and the Elul and all that, now comes the time, and Sukkot also. What's the Sukkah? God is embracing us. God is hugging us. Now is our chance to hug God back. It's our chance to dance in a circle around Him and to show our love for God. That's the joy of Simchas Torah. Okay, my friends? You got it. Laila Tov.